Tuesday to you. We've got a special edition of Weather Impact Live today. You can see we've got a couple of really big guests for us today. Let's start up in Jacksonville. First Coast News Chief Meteorologist Lew Turner. Lew, good to see you, buddy. Thank you for joining us today. And a little bit further up the road in Atlanta, we are pleased to welcome Dr. Knabb from the Weather Channel, hurricane specialist, on-camera meteorologist. Even ran the National Hurricane Center for 5 years, 2012 to 2017. Welcome, Dr. Knabb. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, good afternoon to all of you and everyone in Florida. And wow, what a up and down hurricane season we have had. And in between tropical activity in Florida, dealing with a lot of frontal boundaries and a lot of rainfall. But we could have a very busy second half of the hurricane season.
Yeah, we don't want to get into a lull here where we're thinking because it's been so quiet that the season's almost over. We're just kind of getting into the meat of it, right. The second half. And some indications, we're looking at things like the MJO, especially as we get into October, first half of October, could be more active. But we've got a system on there right now that, I mean, how long has it been? It's been it's today 19 days we haven't had a named storm in the Atlantic, which we haven't seen in about 86 years.
Yeah, guys, this is really an unprecedented peak of season lull. Now, last year we had a notable downturn overall in activity during early September, but we all know what happened after that with the likes of Helene and Milton. But here we go again. But the fact that it's been as quiet as it has for nearly 3 weeks in the peak of the season, especially during the active era since 1995, this has never happened before. However, we know that after September 15th, the last 10 years, we've had more major hurricanes after today's date than we've had before today's date. So even recent history teaches us that the season has a long way to go, guys.
Yeah, water's warmed up. We've got those waves coming in off of Africa. We've had some local weather nearby. I mean, right off of Jacksonville, Lou, you guys had a lot of wind and some rain recently. Dried out a little bit most recently, but that's cooled the water temperature. I know the water temperature in the Gulf has cooled at least a little bit in the eastern Gulf, but usually this time of the year, the water's warm, we're kind of ripe, right? Plenty of ingredients are around for those bigger storms.
Yeah, no doubt about the fact that the later we get in hurricane season, the more unstable the atmosphere gets.
Jumping in just for a second, Bobby, what you had mentioned, it's very interesting with the conditions we've had in Jacksonville. I mean, we've had 2.5, 3 weeks now of steady, if not strong, northeast winds. And it takes me back, and it's a reminder to viewers, I think, that a storm, if you can remember, and anybody who's been around Jacksonville for the last 10 to 15 years would remember a storm like Irma. Irma, while a tropical storm, when it moved a beam of Jacksonville, still caused 500-year flooding here downtown. I mean, things that no one's ever seen before, even going back to 1964 in Dora. So, but the analogy here I'm making is it was a situation just like this in the month prior to Irma. It was steady northeast winds. It was reverse tide situation where the St. Johns River and the Intracoastal Waterway weren't having full low tides, and the high tides, astronomical tides, as well as influenced by these northeast winds, were very, very high. So the watershed was full. So one of the things that's kind of on the back of my mind is not even some sort of, which God forbid, and of course we watch for that direct landfall, but it would be some sort of sideswipe event that brings 15, 20 plus inches of rain like Irma did, even as a tropical storm. So you got to stay on your toes towards the what would be the denouement, the falling action of this hurricane season.
Yeah, in Tampa last year, Helene was 100 miles offshore when you talk about sideswiping, and we had 5 to 8 foot surge. We hadn't seen that in over 100 years. So we understand sideswiping. We got to watch all of these storms. And Dr. Knabb, we have at least 2 waves that we're watching, and we also have the one that's over the Delmarva right now. Why don't you get us started? Let's talk about Invest 92L. I call this kind of a little bit more like a duck because it's walking like a duck, it's looking like a duck, it's almost talking like a duck at this point. What do you think?
Yeah, the Invest 92L, which is the tropical wave here in the middle of the tropical Atlantic. Here's the Eastern Caribbean, here's the coast of Africa, and here it is. And, it just has that look. With the upper, this is the water vapor imagery, so we're looking at the middle and upper level features in the atmosphere mostly. You just see this upper level outflow over the surface low and the tropical wave. So it's got weak wind shear. The atmospheric instability has been increasing. It's headed toward warmer and warmer waters. So it is the first system in a while to have this kind of look, which is opposite to what we've had for the last 2 to 3 weeks, which is a bunch of ups and downs, all this undulation in the subtropical Atlantic, which has been adding to the stability down in the main development region and producing a lot of wind shear. It's been producing this non-tropical low here on the mid-Atlantic. But this is the beginning of a change in the pattern, and that's why this has such a high chance of development. This could become our first depression and storm in a while within the next day or so.
Yeah, Gabrielle is the next name on the list. Go ahead, Lew.
Well, I was going to get a perspective, and I apologize, Bobby. The nature of being in 100 different places all over the country, I'm curious. So we have 92L now with that high chance of development. But it wasn't that long ago, Dr. Knabb, and I want to get your take with the experience at the National Hurricane Center. They're the Weather Channel as well. We also had a Invest 91 not that long ago. And for the active weather watcher out there, our viewers who would be streaming this would be the active weather, consumer. I would assume probably watched that and thought and saw it go from high to low to nothing in almost 24 to 48 hours. Now, obviously, we have different dynamics here. That one had just got surrounded by dry air as got closer and closer to the Lesser Antilles. What do we see that's different this go round that builds your confidence that we're going to get Gabrielle?
Well, first of all, that system that you're talking about earlier in this month did get to 90% chance of development out to 7 days, but it didn't get to 90% within 2 days, which is where we're at now. So we are closer in time with higher confidence than we were last time. And that previous event surprised me. I thought it was going to develop, and so did the Hurricane Center. That's why they put such a high chance on it. But again, those outlooks go out to 7 days now. So that adds a little more time for the systems to not do what we anticipate they are most likely to do. And from several days out, it looked like the atmospheric instability was enough to support it. The models were showing development. But over the subsequent few days, that stable regime moved back in over the Atlantic, and that wasn't caught by the models and the humans as well as this one has been diagnosed, and now we are close to the development potential being, realized, because now the system has a closed low, it's got more convection, and we've also seen the large scale change over the last several days with less wind shear and with getting later in September with these warmer than average waters. The atmosphere has been getting more and more unstable down here over the main development region. So there's the actual water temperatures. Farther west it goes, the warmer the waters get. And this is the instability. And there were kind of breaks in the instability last week. And we've seen this starting to fill in with more yellows and oranges. And we kind of understand what's been going on with the large-scale pattern that has made this more ripe for development as compared to that system a couple weeks ago.
And that's where it's moving, too, right? It's going to take a little jog, it looks like, to the north and the west, and then a little more west-northwest, right towards some of those brighter colors that you have there. Because it's an Invest, we are running the models. And you want to show us those?
Yeah, so when the hurricane specialist at the Hurricane Center designates it an Invest, what that means is they want to collect more data on it. And you usually do that when you've got a decent idea where the center of the system is. And with the closed low, even though it's not well defined yet, they made it an Invest. And you can collect more satellite imagery, you can run more models and get more model tracks. And this is just one example of the output from that. And this is the U.S. global model, the GFS ensemble, a collection of possible track scenarios. So here's the system halfway between Africa and the Eastern Caribbean and the Central Tropical Atlantic. And you've got some tracks that are pretty far south, just northeast of the Caribbean, kind of close to where Aaron went, and you've got tracks that even end up east of Bermuda. So still a huge range of possibilities when you go out into early next week. So there's still a lot of different scenarios that could play out. The chances aren't real high that this makes it to the east coast of the U.S., but it's still a little too early to rule that out.
Yeah, we like to see that jog further north. The more latitude it can gain, a slightly better chance it can get picked up by troughs moving by. But we've always seen those storms that go north and they go west, and if they don't get picked up, they come further west, and that's something that we'll be watching very closely. Talk about some wind shear. I've got that pulled up here, and we've had some wind shear in the Atlantic Basin. You know, we're here in Florida, of course, so we're keeping a close eye on the Gulf, and I tell you, we have been so lucky with that trough basically dipping down into the Gulf. And take a look at the west side of your screen right here, the left side. I'm going to go ahead and put this in motion. You can see those colors over the Gulf. That is wind shear. And if you think back to last week, we had quite a bit of rain with that front that was slowly sinking southward. We actually had a weak low forming out there, but the tops were getting blown off. It couldn't develop. It was along an old frontal boundary. That's what we look for this time of the year, those old frontal boundaries. We're talking about this area right in here. But you can see all of this wind shear here. And so anything that tries to form underneath of this, then it starts to have a problem because the thunderstorms grow up, they get into that wind, and they just get blown out. Now, we actually start watching this area, the Western Caribbean, as we get going through the latter half of the season especially. And right now, that looks like there's not a whole lot of shear. And then if you look out here into this area in the central, what we call more the main development region, the MDR, there's not a lot of wind shear out there. And you can see this is Monday, so we're talking a little less than a week away. And this at least is the European model. It thinks that the center of that is just east of Bermuda, which is right in there. We'll see if that happens. But it does argue, Dr. Knapp and Lew, that, you know, you see this trough sitting here, that is going to help the pick systems up as it moves off further to the north.
Yeah, Bobby, and one of the things I've been,
absolutely.
Of course,
go ahead, Lew.
Focused in on. Well, I was going to say, you know, we stay focused in on that the African wave train that kind of is picked up and through, you know, the 15th, that date, these dates that we have really been watching. But Bobby, you know, the Caribbean is an untapped resource so far this season, and by that I mean there has been nothing that has really moved through like Aaron did, which caused a lot of upwelling, cooled off some of those near Atlantic waters. There has been nothing to do that in the Caribbean. Then we've got to think about the Central American gyre, things spinning up there. I think our focus, of course, stays through the Atlantic and that main development region. But, gosh, I've got a lot of eyes and a lot of thought on that Western Caribbean this time of year, and especially as we get in the next month and a half.
Yeah, those are very good points about how the later we get in September and into October, how the Western Caribbean and close to home systems become an even greater concern than they can be any time of the hurricane season, because any of these tropical waves that don't develop can develop closer to home. But the wind shear that you mentioned that has been strong over the subtropical Atlantic for the last couple of weeks, that shear is weakening, and where Invest 92L is headed, that big upper level low that's been there in the middle of the Atlantic, northeast of the Caribbean, southeast of Bermuda, that's going to be weakening, and this system is going to move into a regime that has a lot more instability and a lot less wind shear than we've seen in that part of the Atlantic for the last couple of weeks. So the overall pattern in the Atlantic Basin is definitely changing to allow for late September to be, I think, a lot busier than early September was.
And then once we get one started, 92 looks like it's going to try. By the way, it looks like it has a whole lot less dust and dry air around it than what 91 did. One of the reasons why 91 just kind of went poof. But that also argues that the next wave coming off of Africa has another chance, although right now only about 20%. But it feels like we're kind of getting into that pattern. So I was looking at the Madden-Julian oscillation and that phase, And it does appear that we'll start to get, especially towards the end of the month and the first half of October, into more of a regime where we have more lift in the atmosphere here. Then what does that atmosphere look like? This is kind of part of the steering flow that we look at here. And this takes us out through about this Saturday. You can see Bermuda, and you can see what the European model thinks is 92, which actually would be Gabrielle if that were the case. But what we're watching is this area of high pressure here. Where does it go? How far does it extend to the west? Does it go back and forth? Which it does go back and forth throughout the season. But that cool and dry air they've had up north lately are these troughs that are sitting here. And if we get those troughs, that argues for these things to get picked up, because they're not going to go right into a high pressure. They're going to bounce around basically like a bobber, going around these area of high pressures, and then they look for a little area of weakness right in there. And if they can get to that weakness area, they will cut up through it. You can see kind of coming around the side of this area of the high pressure. But the question is, what are the long-range models looking like? So you see you get a high over there far in the eastern Atlantic. That would argue for anything that develops would have a better chance of coming up and going out. All right? But it won't stay that way. And in fact, as you look towards the end of the month, that high shifts a little bit more towards the central U.S. So do you guys have any thoughts on where we think we're kind of headed towards the end of the month in October as far as track? Because we're talking about that pattern change, and that pattern change helps us make storms, potentially at least. But what about that pattern change about where they may go?
Yeah, I can generally discuss that. There's a really good reason why the Hurricane Center still doesn't issue track forecasts out to 7 days even yet, because once you get out past that 5-day time frame, the track uncertainty really gets high, and long-range track forecasting, like out to 2 to 3 weeks, is especially difficult. And you add to that the fact that we don't exactly know how far east subsequent systems after 92L are going to form, because one thing that can happen is, if say you have a trough in the eastern U.S., for a system like 92L that looks like it'll form pretty far out in the Atlantic and go north of the Caribbean, its chances of recurvature are pretty high. And missing the U.S., not a guarantee, but pretty high. But if a tropical wave takes longer to develop, and or you get something interacting with that Central American gyre over the Western Caribbean area, and you get something form in that zone in late September or into October, like Helene, like Milton, then you don't have a protection mechanism with that East Coast trough. That could just bring systems north toward Florida.
Yeah, it's not, I always say it's not what it looks like now on the weather map. It's what it looks like in about a week from now when the storm gets close to us. Because the troughs get replaced with ridges, and those ridges can shove it right underneath of it and move it off towards the west. And then we've got the models, and everybody loves to see the spaghetti plots, right? They love to compare the models all the time, especially on the internet. And when we're looking at those, we understand that process, how they run every 6 to 12 hours. But if you look at 92L right now, this goes out through Saturday into early on Sunday, and you can see the big difference just between the GFS and the European alone. And this is one of the reasons why we always say you just have to be prepared, just because it's hurricane season. You see the difference? One model, I mean, they're completely off from each other. Both, yes, do show it recurving, but that's not set in stone. And you just need to understand that these things can take on a life of their own, and we need to keep a close eye on them.
I'm just glad we get to spend this time together, gentlemen. Dr. Knabb and Bobby, I'm glad we get to do it every Tuesday. I've got about 100 more questions, and we could spend another 2.5 hours. But you know what we can do? We can do it for about 20 minutes every Tuesday, and we can spread it out through the hurricane season and help folks out there stay the most prepared, because that's what, at the end of the day, we can talk till we're blue in the face, but we just want you at home prepared, ready and raring to go in the event of a scenario impacting us here in the Deep South. So God bless you guys. Great talking with you.
Yeah.
And look forward to doing it again on Tuesday.
Thank you very much, Dr.
Well,
Knabb.
I'm looking forward to it as well. And last year shows us how busy the late season can be. So we got to be ready for this year as well.
That's right. Good. Great. And we're looking forward to seeing you next Tuesday, too. We'll chat more. All right, guys, we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll come back. We'll talk a little bit more about local Florida forecasts, and we're going to jump up to the Delmarva. They've got that non-tropical low over the Ocean City, Maryland right now.
story. We've had pleasant morning low temperatures, and as you wake up on a Wednesday, expect those lows to be in the mid-60s. Now, if you're at the beach, we'll have low temperatures up to around 70 degrees, a little more mild considering the impacts of the ocean. And another story is going to be those winds out of the northeast. Steady and has been for the last several weeks. East-northeast winds persist through the rest of our work week and then really begin to pick up as we get to the weekend as a front begins to move back up from South Florida towards us. That's going to tighten the pressure gradient, lead to some stronger winds, stronger onshore flow. That means higher rip current risk, some sloppier waves out there, and perhaps even small craft advisories. I know we've had issues for offshore fishermen because of those small craft advisories and bigger waves. We've had a little bit of a relaxed sea out there the last couple of days, 3-foot seas out there at our buoys just offshore. Those will pick up, though, probably 5 to 6 feet and higher as we get towards the weekend. And that'll be our next best chance of rain, too. So we tick up our temperatures a degree or two each day. We'll be in the upper 80s near 90 as we go through the end of our work week. And then by the weekend, we have to watch our rain chances, especially at the beach. Best chance of showers will be along the coastline. By Sunday, though, we know we got Jags coming back to town, got a home game against the Texans at 1 o'clock. We'll be watching for that chance of showers during that game. Right now, at least, early in the week and with current modeling, it looks like the lightning risk is low. We will need to watch that carefully, though, considering, remember that first home game for the Jags, we had those lightning delays. So we'll watch that and fine-tune as we get a little bit closer to Sunday, but for now we're keeping those rain chances around 40%, might bump them to 60. In the tropics, a couple of areas we need to watch. Right now still way off in the Atlantic, so we're talking 10 days to 2 weeks out before we get any resolution with these systems, though current modeling would suggest staying away from the east coast of the United States. So that's a look at your forecast for now. Thanks so much for streaming along with us and watching our 24/7 Weather Channel. I'm First Coast News Chief Meteorologist Lew Turner. Have a good rest of your week.
Hi, I'm meteorologist Lee Southwick. You're watching the First Coast News Weather Channel. We are proud to have been named the most accurate weather team in Jacksonville for the 5th year in a row by Weather Rate. We take our forecasting very seriously, and we want to get every detail right and accurate. We know weather impacts your day, whether it's going to work, going to school, running errands, going to the beach, or out on the water. You need to know what time that rain is going to arrive, how hot it's going to be, if fog is going to impact you, or if it's windy. And we want to nail it every day for you. We promise to keep working hard to stay the most accurate when it comes to forecasting for the First Coast.
You're looking for answers. You need to understand the facts. You want the truth.
The First Coast is my home. I grew up here and I worked really hard to get back here.
Because I want you to be ready for what's coming.
You got to make sure you're exactly on point with your forecast.
Being part of the most accurate weather team, we can give you that trust, helping you stay safe.
You earn someone's trust by showing up every day for them.
Why does it matter in a forecast? Trust isn't everything, it's the only thing.
Consistency with, the accuracy in your forecast.
You're planning your day around it. You're planning your life around the weather forecast. Every storm.
Every forecast.
We are earning your trust.
Rely on the team working every day to earn your trust. First Coast News on your side.
Hi, folks. I'm meteorologist Lew Turner, working here at First Coast News. We're on your side. Been here since 2010, forecasting the weather for Southeast Georgia, for the First Coast and Northeast Florida. And it is a blessing and a treat to get to do it and work here with the First Coast News Weather Channel, which is powered by the First Coast's most accurate weather team.
My passion is making sure you are prepared to start your day.
I grew up watching First Coast News. I grew up watching Tim Deegan.
Meteorology is not only my job, it's my hobby.
I love being a meteorologist. I love being a part of your day.
When it comes to a forecast, trust isn't just one thing. Trust is the only thing that matters.
The First Coast's most accurate weather team, sponsored by AC Designs.